When I was 18 years old, I started training as a state registered nurse. I was very naive for my age, the youngest of 4 children, and up to that point had led a very sheltered life. I hadn't seen anybody vomit, let alone deal with ill patients. As part of the training, we were asked to go out onto the wards to feed patients. So one day, a registered nurse asked me to feed Mrs. Jones in bed 16 a cup of tea and gave me a teacher beaker, much like a toddler has, and told me that Mrs. Jones had had a stroke. I went off very apprehensive, but as keen as mustard to deal with a real patient. I arrived at bed 16, the curtains were closed, and I stood in the ward just waiting. I didn't know whether Mrs. Jones could be using a commode or a bedpan behind those curtains, so I just waited and waited until eventually a staff nurse came rushing past and asked me, basically said to me, "Nurse, you're not going to feed Mrs. Jones that cup of tea standing there. Go in." So I took a deep breath. I took a step into the curtained area. Mrs. Jones was lying there with her head slightly elevated and her eyes closed. And again, we've been told to talk to our patients. So I explained who I was and told her I was going to give her a cup of tea. And a typical English response of talking about the weather, because that's what we talk about when we don't know what to say. So as I was sitting there and holding Mrs. Jones's hand, I fed her tea, and a little bit of tea came dripping out on one side of her mouth. So I picked up a tissue and mopped it up and continued trying to give the tea, but she was not swallowing and there was no real response from her. As I said, I picked up her hand and stroked her arm, but still no response. So eventually I left the curtained area and went back out onto the ward and approached a different registered nurse and basically said, "Excuse me, nurse, I tried to give Mrs. Jones her cup of tea, but she wouldn't take it." The nurse looked at me as if I'd gone berserk and basically said, "Well, I'm not surprised, nurse. Mrs. Jones died 15 minutes ago." I stood there absolutely confused. I felt sick. My whole innocent life went up in a puff of smoke. I felt bewildered. I felt like my heart had sunk into my stomach. I couldn't believe that I hadn't realised that she was dead. This situation and many deaths that I have witnessed over the ensuing years have made me feel angry. The suffering of the patients and relatives was agonising. I felt everybody's pain. I knew I needed to come up with a strategy that would help me cope with the ups and downs of nursing life. One that would give me the patience and compassion and the ability to serve everybody at their highest will and good. Soon after qualifying as a registered nurse, after one particularly bad shift with some difficult patients, I sat exhausted with my head in my hands. I found myself thinking, what question do I need to ask myself? What will help me cope with the incessant onslaught? And after some time, the answer came, can I love them enough to hold fast when chaos reigns? When I realised that I needed to be more impersonal than that, and looking at my own bottom line, how would I like to be treated in those situations? How could I, and what question do I need to ask myself? And what would love do here was born. I've asked that question many times a day over the last 35 years, and the answer has helped me create an extraordinary life of happiness and joy. The practical use of using this question is what I would like to explore with you today. Love is complex. It's a mixture of emotions, behaviors, beliefs associated with feelings of affection, protectiveness, warmth, and respect for another person. Charlie Brown has had a lot to say about love, what love is. And one of my favourites is love is not what you say, love is what you do. Philosophers, poets, writers, scientists have debated the definition of love for generations, and there have been many disagreements about its precise meaning. When one person says, "I love you," can mean something completely different for somebody else. For me, love is a conscious act, an act of will, a decision and commitment to come from the bigger picture. A commitment to rise out of the me again mentality into the expanded we mentality, embracing empathy, diversity, possibility, becoming a person who sees the bigger picture, puts themselves in another person's shoes without judging, embracing the spiritual warrior. The strength of the spiritual warrior is not in the arms, however, but in the heart. The question we need to be asking, what would love do here? But how do we trust the answer we receive? By establishing a personal bottom line. The bottom line describes the ultimate outcome of a situation, or the most important or fundamental facet of any situation. When someone asks for a bottom line, they want to cut out the superficial details and focus on the primary problem or objective. So how do you know what is in your bottom line? First, you need to ask yourself, what type of person do I want to be? Look at who inspires you. Who are your heroes? What values, beliefs, and moral compass do they possess? What attracts you to them? My heroes include Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Paramahansa Yogananda, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, to name a few. You need to adopt what resonates with you and save them into your bottom line by identifying with them with passion and integrity, which gives you a blueprint of the behaviours, outlooks, and actions that are acceptable to you. Take action, only do, say, behave in a way that is congruent with those values and beliefs. Second, commit to a reflective practice, which is a popular tool used in nursing. It's simple. You can use it to help you learn in any situation. You will ask yourself 5 questions. 1, what happened? Just the facts, no emotion or judgment. 2, what was good about it? Focusing on the good, teasing out the gold. 3, what was not so good about it? Anything that didn't make you feel good. 4, what was the learning from it? And 5, what would you do differently next time? Using this practice every day helps you redefine who you truly are and how you want to behave in the future. Only then can you begin to ask yourself the question, what would love do here? And trust the inner answer you receive. Let me show you how this works in practice. I got married when I was 47 years old. It was fantastic, but a huge readjustment. after being single for so long. I've been married for 13 years, and during that time, there have been many mornings when I've woken up, looked across the bed, and realised that I was not alone. In the half light, half sleep, I wondered who's sleeping next to me? Who on earth is this? And then I remember it's my husband, a person I committed to spend my life with. Then I asked myself the question, what would love do here? The answer has always been, here is an opportunity to actively choose to love, to understand and enjoy our time together. And I feel incredibly grateful to have him in my life. Let's look at families. We are all human, and there are times where miscommunication happens. Maybe it's between us and a parent or a sibling, and our feelings are hurt. We would desperately like to be heard or have our opinions validated. This is an ideal time to ask yourself what would love do here, and before careering off and spouting some intense justification or vitriolic accusation, you wait silently for the inner answer. Then take action. Choosing to come from love is the hero's path and the choice of a courageous spiritual warrior. In today's world, one of the areas where we can feel most exposed is on social media, with trolls thinking they can do or say anything and not be accountable for the chaos and the hurt that they cause. Here is another opportunity to ask yourself, what would love do here? It may be the answer is not to engage with it at all. However, if you feel passionate about it, you may feel drawn to answer, but make sure that you come from a state of love, acceptance, empathy, simply stating your case without anger, emotion, or ridicule. There are many situations around the world today that might be making us feel helpless and hopeless. COVID-19, poverty of the third world, climate change, and the loss of rainforest. How can asking yourself what would love do here be helpful? It's because it gets you in touch with your own bottom line. What is acceptable to you personally? Not everybody is going to be passionate about the same causes and have the ability to help out. However, asking yourself what would love do here helps you access a resourceful space where you can come up with practical solutions to global problems. Ideas that will move us from the me mentality into the we mentality of inclusivity, expansion, growth, and being the change we would like to see in the world. In reflection, if I asked my 18-year-old self, while dealing with Mrs. Jones, the question, what would love do here? Although nothing is going to change the outcome, what would have happened was I wouldn't have blamed myself for not realizing that she was dead. Ultimately, it's important to understand that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience and not the other way around. Once we truly embrace that, we can uncover our own magnificence, and the need for competition, greed, and selfishness drops away. I am inviting you to go and build your bottom line. Start your reflective practice. Ask yourself the question, what would love do here? Trust the answer. Be love in action and become the spiritual warriors that the world desperately needs now.